Can Godzilla solo analog horror? Let's find out. With October, Halloween is officially here for the most part. The spooky season is in the air, and I knew that this month on YouTube, I wanted to dedicate the content to Halloween and all the spookiness that comes with that. So pretty much, we're gonna start off a little simple here and talk about a whole bunch of analog horrors and scale a whole bunch of verses and their power to see what versions of Godzilla can stack up realistically. And today, we're pretty much gonna crush the notion that analog horror is weak. You know, in the power scaling community, a lot of people think that all of these characters are fodder, street level, bullet level, but with the sheer amount of characters and different types of stories that we get from the medium, I promise you there's going to be a lot of surprising scaling chains that you'll find yourself learning after watching this video. And yes, I don't think this is a spite matchup, so we'll get into that. So whether it's Monument Mythos, Gemini Entertainment, or even the Walton Files, I assure you we're going to be scaling a little bit of everything. So if you're interested in that, be sure to stick around. But first, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and it's a goal that I think we're going to be hitting in the next couple of weeks. So I just want to take the time to thank you guys for the support, and if you're new here, then be sure to subscribe. We post weekly long format videos such as this, as well as a bunch of shorts throughout the week. So considering everything is free, you're going to get a lot of content out of me. Also, my 100,000 subscriber special is going to be me going over gaming Sonic and gaming Mario. So that's a little bit more incentive if you're really new here. But with the shilling out the way, let's get into the topic that you clicked the video to find out. Before we get into the analog horror scaling, I just want to say that I'm going to be taking these horrors and putting them up against narratively appropriate Godzillas, similar to what I did for my Superman vs. the Big Three of Horror video. So obviously, I'm not going to be putting Godzilla Earth up against like the Big Bad Wolf or any characters that are obviously going to get stomped by him. I think this is fun because it makes the topic and the verdict a lot more interesting, and we get to cover a lot more Godzillas as a result. So yeah, with that being said, I'm going to be talking about the first group of characters being Bond from the Walton Files, the Big Bad Wolf from Foxymation's analog horror series, as well as the Bat from the Batman horror series. And overall, these are characters that tend to be in that wall to small building level range of attack potency at best. Like we've got Bond, who's inspired by the FNAF crew, and he has similar feats of stuffing people into animatronic suits. Assuming that it's to the same degree as we see from FNAF, that's easily a wall level feat. This is pretty consistent with his scaling, as he's shown multiple times and implied to be able to take out human beings as well as rip off things such as their limbs. And he seems to be in that super to peak human speed range, as he's always getting the better of characters and he's able to, you know, get rid of them or game end them before they can react. We have similar scaling chains for the wolf from Foxymations, as that guy can actually take out a whole bunch of animals, including bears. Seeing as how I literally just said how he beats up bears, you're not going to be surprised when I tell you that, yeah, he also has scaling chains that imply that he's stronger than human beings. And this guy is literally a wolf, so he gets that superhuman speed scaling like as a baseline. Even in the analog horror itself, it's shown that he's really swift. And as for his durability, it's also pretty impressive. He's able to endure a shotgun right to the face. And he's shot multiple times, mind you. And in order to actually get rid of him, he needed an entire house to drop on top of him, as well as fire being, you know, added to the collapse. Fire being his weakness. So seeing as how you need brick houses and his weakness on top of that to put him down for sure, that's easily a wall or small building level character. And moving on to the Bat, who is a Batman-inspired analog horror character, and his feats and accolades aren't quite as impressive as our previous guys, but still nothing to really scoff at. Actually, this is kind of an editing thing, and I just realized that the creator of the show deleted all his videos. I have no idea why, so unfortunately I couldn't really, you know, dive into his scaling chain, so I'm just going to be scaling someone else instead. But for any of you guys watching, can anyone inform me on why he got rid of these videos? Are they controversial? I had no idea. So to all the Bat fans, my bad. I'm going to be scaling someone else to make it an even 3. So I guess we'll go over the man in the suit. Obviously, I've scaled this guy a couple of times here on the channel, but if you would remember, a lot of his best scaling chains get him above regular human beings. Once again, he's able to overpower human beings while they're in kaiju suits on top of that. And as for his speed feats, you know, it's narratively implied that he can keep on pace with cars. And he's got a -1 type of regeneration factor going on because overall his physicals and his durability are not as impressive as the previous characters we've talked about, as a shotgun was able to pretty much blow his entire head off. But he was able to regen in a convenient manner of time, seeing as how the short portrays that he's back up pretty much almost instantly. So with these 3 analog horrors covered for the most part, let's move on to a Godzilla who I think will give them a good fight. With these type of characters, it's kind of hard to find a Godzilla that's narratively appropriate, seeing as how they're street tiers. But when I think of street tiers, I think of My Hero Academia, as Deku is the infamous street tier slayer. And luckily for us, there's a Godzilla in My Hero that I can actually scale and talk about. He's got about 13 seconds of screen time, and his name is Godzilla. And he's a superhero, so a superhero Godzilla versus these street tier villains, I think that's kind of a little appropriate. And granted, this guy is feetless, right? He has 13 seconds of screen time after all, but considering the fact that Deku was gushing over him, I think it's fair enough to scale him off of a 5% Deku who has hypersonic speed showings as well as multi-city block level attack potency and therefore durability as well. And I think it's fair enough to assert that Godzilla could take out these 3 analog horrors. And plus, while this Godzilla isn't like a full-on kaiju, he's still massive. He's about the size of a small building. So yeah, I think that he could take out these guys for sure. He's way faster than them on top of that, and he's more than likely stronger than them. Godzilla -1's regen might be an issue, but then again, considering a shotgun blast is enough to take him out, you know, Godzilla's probably gonna be able to destroy him faster than he can regen. And hey, if you really don't like me scaling Godzilla for whatever reason, just trust me, every Godzilla ever is able to beat these 3 guys. Even Shin Godzilla has multi-city block kinetic energy just by moving. Even Komodo-kan, like the first form, is around small building level. So yeah, 90% of Godzillas take this guy out. So don't get mad at me for having fun with this one and talking about Godzilla. And now that I think about it, I think Godzilla actually beat Shin Godzilla. Is that ridiculous to say? But at worst, he's dealing with the 3 analog horrors that we've talked about. So with the fodder covered, let's move on to some of the heavy hitters. For this part of the video, I've kind of got a quick lightning round going on. There's tons of analog horror entities and characters. So to get a good grasp with them, we're going to have a little quick section in the middle of the video. So with that being said, let's move on to Siren Head. And he's a character who at worst would find himself in the wall level ranges of attack potency via his just general dimensions and length, right? That's been calculated. But at best, this guy is around large building to multi-city block level plus, reaching on town level. And ironically, the large building level stuff comes from the fact that he's 40 feet tall and he's portrayed to be on par with things such as windmills in terms of size. But at best, the multi-city block level stuff comes from the fact that he's able to clear entire forestations. Like, characters see him in a patch of woods, they turn around and it's just replaced with an empty space. No trees, no logs. So that's casual multi-city block level plus showings on his end. And as for his speed, he should be in those superhuman to subsonic ranges, as we have instances of characters seeing him while, you know, passing in cars, and then when they get closer up to the area that they presume them to be in, he's gone. So that's a subsonic character right there. Pretty good, and he's a pretty decent step up from the last guys, but arguably he's still a Godzilla victim in my opinion. And if you don't like the Godzilla scaling chain, Godzilla 54 is a character who can no-sell atom bombs and he can output energy comparable to them. So seeing as how we've established city level is a very casual end for 99% of Godzillas, characters such as Shin Sonic would also be no real threat to him, as that's a character whose only real objective scaling chains come from the fact that he's just so massive and he's traveling at massively hypersonic speeds, which would grant him city level kinetic energy. So don't get me wrong, Shin Sonic is casually city level, such as Godzilla, but you know, Godzilla has more quantifiable ends. If we're going to use 54 alone, he has statements that imply that he's a mountain buster, and he has feats such as boiling a huge quantity of seawater, and due to the heat of Godzilla's atomic breath, this is actually an island to even country level feat. So Godzilla is deeper into those sea level ranges, and he has actual quantifiable ends that are much higher. So characters such as Siren Head and Shin Sonic, they're Gojira victims for the most part. Possibly one of the most famous analog horror creatures at this moment is the Boiled One, and he's a character who has a pretty surprising scaling chain. While for the most part physically he doesn't do that much in the show, as a lot of his, you know, just abilities are just like mental things, he does have one feat that we can talk about, or two actually. As firstly, it's implied that he caused the 2003 blackout that affected over 50 million homes. There's a calculation on the Versus Wiki that stems from JoJo where a character is able to cause a blackout, and it got up to around mountain level. And keep in mind, that's for causing a 12-hour blackout in Tokyo. Whereas this blackout lasted multiple days and it affected multiple states. So that's a low ball. And it's actually pretty consistent with the fact as he's able to tear open a hole in the sky, which comes out to around island level. Pretty impressive, but I think the best Godzilla for this guy is GMK Godzilla. As for starters, they both have a lot of narrative parallels, being possessed spirits of World War II soldiers. But one thing to note is that GMK is stated to be stronger than the OG-54 Godzilla, meaning that he gets the Boiled One's high-end scaling, the mountain to island level stuff, as a baseline. And keep in mind, that was like really casual for the OG Godzilla. And this GMK Godzilla is stronger. And on top of that, GMK Godzilla has experience with destroying spirits or ghosts, such as shown in pretty much all GMK. So assuming that the Boiled One actually scales to the feats that I talked about in his physical presence when he manifests it, Godzilla's atomic breath should be more than potent to get rid of him. So right now, we're going to see a huge jump in power for analog horror, as these threats are a lot more cosmic horror-esque and Lovecraftian to a certain extent, being Local 58 and Gemini Entertainment. As these main threats are the moon, as well as a virus that can take a hold of entire planets and shoot giant Dragon Ball laser attacks from their surfaces. So all things considered, it's quite the jump, to be honest, as we arguably have large planetary characters as well as just the moon. So what Godzillas are able to deal with that. And honestly, I think the narratively most appropriate matchup is Godzilla Earth, the big hippie Godzilla. This guy's job is to pretty much protect the entire planet. So these type of threats would definitely be on this guy's radar. And that's pretty good for the Earth, because Godzilla Earth has shown the capability to destroy entire stars that are in collision with the planet Earth. As I'm talking about specifically the Gorath instance, as in the second prequel novel to the anime trilogy, Godzilla went into hibernation to store enough power to destroy Gorath, which is explicitly stated to be a star. So as you could imagine, if the moon or the iris were to pull up on the planet Earth, this version of Godzilla would just simply blow them up, and he could certainly get the job done. As the instance with Gorath was when the guy was 50 meters tall. You know, in between the prequels and the anime trilogy, there's a time gap of around 20,000 years where Godzilla gets even larger and evolves to become even more powerful. And in the third film, we see how powerful this guy has become, as in the prequel novel, he's splitting apart stars, whereas in the films, this guy is blowing up entire black holes. So the moon and the iris, they're cooked. Monument Mythos is probably one of the most influential pieces of analog horror. It's also one of the most expansive, and as a result of that, there are tons of characters with tons of different unique scaling chains. But seeing as how, we're running on time here, I'm just going to talk about the strongest entity in the verse, being the Horned Serpent, a character who just by being born and manifesting itself was able to destroy the planet to a dwarf star level yield. But for much higher ends, the creator of the show states that his presence affected multiple universes just by being born, or rather manifesting itself in the physical world. He also confirms that it's an extra dimensional being, with it being connected to Wonderland, a place that's infinite in scope as well as where time is irrelevant to it. So it's likely an infinite fifth dimensional construct. And the Horned Serpent is stated to be at a similar level of existence or power. So unironically, analog horror has fifth dimensional characters. And luckily for us, there are tons of Godzillas that can possibly take this guy out. We've got Marvel Godzilla, who scales to actual canon Marvel characters. We've also got Heisei Godzilla, a character who was able to box with Space Godzilla, who in himself was able to utilize super gravity to an infinite level, with super gravity being stated to be super dimensional in a cosmology that considers fourth dimensional spaces to just be normal for the most part. And a base Heisei Godzilla grew so much in power that if Space Godzilla, who could siphon siphoned this arguably infinite fifth-dimensional energy source attempted to siphon Godzilla's power, he would have just overloaded and exploded, which is consistent with the fact that that's exactly what Godzilla did with his base atomic breath. And there's even Godzilla Ultima, who I talked about in this video here. So to answer the main question of this video, if Godzilla still is analog horror, and I'd say, yeah, pretty much all the major ones. I'm sure there's stronger versions out there, but for the most part, all the major ones, there's a version of Godzilla that can handle the threat that is displayed in that media. And just like that, that's all the time that we've got this week to talk about analog horrors. But don't worry, seeing as how it's October, just comment a series you want me to cover, and maybe I'll make another video or short to talk about that property. But as always, I'll see you guys next week with another video. But until then, as always, stay big G fans.